Hey, you've made it to the podcast Recovery Captured, hosted by me, Shannon Louise, a certified recovery coach and self-verified addict. Join me on my journey through my recovery from mind-altering substances, eating disorders, depression, and much, much more. During this podcast, you'll hear my personal experience, thoughts, and opinions, as well as my guests' stories through their own recovery. I hope that you're able to take something away from this podcast and use it as a tool to help you see that your story is picture perfect. Okay. There it is. All right, Leigh-Ann, you're going to give us the goods. Okay.
Give you the goods.
Yeah. Okay. So what are you in recovery for? How long have you been in recovery? And give us a fun fact about you.
Oh my God. I know. I was thinking about a fun fact and I was like, shit, I don't know if I have a fun fact.
Shit, son, I'm boring.
I am boring. Not that I got sober and got boring. I just was boring. So I'm Leigh-Ann. I'm in recovery from, I usually say alcohol just because, you know, my recovery journey was through AA. So I tend to keep it alcohol, but I am in recovery from heroin, crack cocaine, alcohol, anything I could put into my body to make me not feel like myself, I would do in excess. And even now, I can still do that with shopping, sex, food, not eating, like things like that. So I can really take anything to excess, and it's just my personality. So like I'm basically in recovery from anything. But mainly heroin, cocaine, and alcohol when I didn't have drugs. So my fun fact, you know, I was like thinking about this and I was like, I don't even know if I've done anything cool, but you know, I used to do a lot of gymnastics. I used to do ballet, and I look back at it now. So I'm like pretty flexible. I used to be able to do, I don't know if I still could, I probably could, splits and all, backflips and all that. So like I actually can do cool stuff. I just haven't tried in years.
Well, that's cool. I didn't know that about you. I would like to see you try. So when
I'll take a picture and be like, I can still do it.
A little video.
Yeah. I'll be like, Kev, hold on. Can you record this?
Oh, awesome. All right. So just get into it. Tell us what it was like, what happened, and where we are now.
So, you know, I grew up in okay, so let me start at the way beginning. I grew up in an abusive marriage. I was one of those fix-it marriage babies.
Yeah.
And it didn't fix the marriage because alcohol and drugs were really prevalent in my parents' early relationship. My earliest memories are of my dad getting drunk and locking my mother out of the house and locking my brother and I inside. So my brother Jim is my full-blooded brother, and my brother Andy is my half brother from a different relationship, and I'm the baby. And so my oldest brother was 18 at the time, and my middle brother I was probably like 4, so he was probably like 8, 10 years old, somewhere in there. And my dad locked my mom out. He threw her off the porch by her throat and locked my brother Jim and I inside. So my earliest memory is my mom escaping that relationship and my brother Andy knocking my dad out. That is the earliest memory I have of my childhood where my parents were both together. And being the, you know, alcoholic drug addict, like I get it. Like I get it. My dad was kind of a piece of shit because of drugs and alcohol, so I get it. And, you know, my mom, you know, kind of jumped around from man to man after that. So that was like my earliest idea of what relationship should look like. And, I don't blame her because, she was a newly single mom to 3 kids, basically. Mm-hmm. So I don't blame her for that. But she, landed with my stepfather, and my stepfather is still my stepfather today. So he's basically, don't get me wrong, I love my biological dad. I'll get into that later. But my stepfather was like the one who was truly my dad, who kept the roof over my head, food on the table, mm-hmm. even though he was a high functioning alcoholic and still is to this day. And so my mom smokes a lot of weed and like, she lives in Vermont still. So she's like, yay, it's legal. So, and my mom is what I would like to call a prescribed junkie. So if a doctor prescribes it, it's okay type deal. Yeah. And you know what? My mom has a lot of mental health issues, which will come up again later. So I don't suggest that my mother stop taking these meds by any means, but they're pretty needed. But that's just like how like we grew up was like, okay, the doctor prescribed it, it's okay. So my mom, got with my stepfather, and they're high functioning alcoholics. So we were latchkey kids from that point on. They would go party with their friends after work every night. We'd have to lock the door, not let anyone in. Like they would, come home, feed us, and go to bed. Maybe there'd be a fight. It was pretty explosive in the household. So we kind of walked around on eggshells in that house. My stepfather wasn't the nicest to my brother, but I'm the baby and I'm a girl. So I got a lot more, I was treated a lot nicer than my brother was.
Sure.
And like, that's okay. Like, hey, it's whatever. I don't blame them now. I want to repeat that. Like, I don't blame my parents for my alcoholism or my drug addiction. But what I did grow up seeing is that it was normalized. That is what you did. You would go to work, come home, drink, do whatever you wanted. My stepfather was a straight edge, so he didn't do drugs, but my mom liked to smoke weed and do drugs from time to time. And like, that's what you did. That was my normal. So growing up, that is what I wanted to do. I was going to get a job. I was going to, do whatever the hell I was going to do. I didn't even know what I wanted to be at this point. And I was just going to go to work, come home, maybe have a family. And then I was going to party with my friends all the time. Mm-hmm. So that was like my childhood in a nutshell. So I grew up in Grand Isle, Vermont, small town. Everyone knows everyone.
It's a gorgeous town, though.
Expensive as hell, though. Listen, I live in Texas, and things are expensive here. But I was looking at my old apartments in Vermont. Girl, how do you guys even afford to live up there with the job market like shit? I can't.
I can't even start explaining to you how we get by.
Like, well, I see you're doing like a podcast, you're doing tattooing. I'm sure you're doing something in the recovery community because you've always been like that. Mm-hmm. So like, you're like doing 300 things just to stay afloat up there. I fucking can't.
Like, yeah, it's hard.
Oh, I was looking at old apartments. It's insane up there. Mm-hmm. Like my old apartment, I paid $1,000 for, is going for like $1,500 now. Mm-hmm. Girl, I pay. Girl, I paid $1,300 for a 1-bedroom apartment. Okay, this is the expensive part, but it's in a gated community. I have a pool. I have pool access. Like, I live in an area where there's like Targets and shit everywhere. Like, no state tax. Just saying. So everything's cheaper. Like, I'm telling you, I'm glad we got out of there. Okay, so anywho, so I grew up in Grand Isle, small town. Everyone knows your name. I started experimenting with alcohol because my parents had an alcohol cabinet. And my best friend like lived down the street. So we'd sneak out. We're like 10 years old, mind you, sneaking out with like Jesus juice, which is just a bottle of every alcohol in that cabinet. And it was fucking disgusting. But tell you what, we drank that and it got me outside of myself. And I remember from that moment forward, I don't remember like what happened the first time per se, but I do remember wanting to do it again. I know that I threw up that night and like it tasted like shit, but I just remember being like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do from now on. My parents, they were trying to do the best they could, with what they had. And when I was in the Grand Isle school system, I was a good kid. I did track, basketball, soccer, all the sports, kind of in like the idea to like get my parents to pay attention to me. Like if I exceeded in these things, then they would pay attention to me, which which wasn't really the case necessarily. I did ballet, gymnastics, basically anything to be like, hey, I'm here.
Right.
And I excelled in a lot, and I was a very smart girl, but I was also very sensitive. I was a very sensitive kid. And I don't know if that attributed to like me wanting to be outside of myself, but I was like very sensitive to a lot of things. And when I hit high school age, I'd already experimented with like a little bit of drugs, like stealing like weed from my brother, or like finding drugs like at our parents' house and like keeping them, like cocaine pills, things like that. So I'd already started experimenting with drugs by the time, I was 13. And that's when I went to high school, because it was before they made that rule, like you got to be a certain age to go to school. So I was like technically a year younger. So I turned 14 in high school, and I went to Essex first, and my whole family went to South Burlington. Yeah, I was a bad kid though. I'll get it. You wait. This is why you didn't meet me. So I went to Essex against what my parents wanted, because my whole family went to South Burlington. And I went there because all my friends were going there, and that's where I wanted to go. But I also learned really quickly that that school is 45 minutes away, bus ride to Essex. I could drink on the bus, first off. And I could go to school and no one knew my name, and no one, because like in Grand Isle, they knew your name. If you miss school, they're calling your mom. In Essex, like you can fly under the radar for a while before they start figuring it out, because there's so many kids there.
Right.
And I don't blame the school for this. But that's exactly what I did. I flew under the radar. I'd skip class. I'd go to, oh my God, before they took it away, I'd like go to the rocks and smoke cigarettes with like all my friends. And like we'd go in the woods and smoke weed or burn turns and all those things. And really drugs became something much higher importance than my education. And which happens with a lot of people. But everything took precedent over my school. And I was skipping, and I was getting in trouble, and I was like getting caught for smoking cigarettes and shit. And like my mom would let me smoke cigarettes. She really didn't care about the cigarette part. But eventually, I got expelled from Essex. I don't remember. I got in a fight with the principal, and I said some really nasty things, because I also grew up in a, how do I want to put it, like a closeted racist house.
Yeah.
Which things have changed. Don't get me wrong, my parents have changed, but like, hey, that's just like what I grew up and what I was taught. So I said some pretty nasty things to the principal and was kicked out. So they kicked me out for skipping and being nasty, and that it's okay. So from that point, I went back to, my mom was like, you're going to go to South Burlington, because she thought it was the school system. This is my mom's like MO. It wasn't really me. It was the school, or it was this, or it was the friends I was hanging out with. It wasn't really me.
Right.
Which, how wrong was she? Because it was me corrupting everyone else around me. But man, my poor mom. I feel bad for her now.
Did you meet Kevin while you were in and out of Essex before you went to?
No, actually.
No.
So I went to South Burlington. I did the same thing there. There's a lot going on with South Burlington, and I'm going to keep this part short, just because like what it was like, I don't find as important as like what it's like now. So I try to keep this as like narrow as possible, but I did the same thing at South Burlington. Got in more trouble at South Burlington, and they were like, fuck you, do drug counseling, which I did. And I would get drunk and eat peanut butter and go do a breathalyzer and pass somehow. Yeah.
Never.
I don't suck on pennies, which is absolutely disgusting, but it would like fuck with the breathalyzers and would make you blow zeros. But at this point, I was like heavily into drinking every day before school and heavily into like doing pills when I could get them type shit. Or ecstasy was really big when we were in high school. So I'd do a lot of that and acid as well and go to school. Like I remember one time my mom picked me up from South Burlington High School after I dropped acid and they called me over the intercom and I was just starting to feel like, oh fuck. And my mom had to come and pick me up. And like I was in the car with my mom and I was like, Mom, the stoplight looks like Glenda the Good Witch's bubble. And my mom was like, are you on fucking acid right now? I was like, actually, I am. So that was fine. But my mom was a very big hippie. My parents are Grateful Dead heads. My biological parents are Grateful Dead heads. I actually have a tattoo of an album cover on my thigh. I'll get into the reason why later. But so my parents weren't like super against drugs, even for me.
Right.
But so I got like I stopped going to South Burlington, did homeschooling for 2 months, went back to Essex, and they were like, hey, like the state is going to take you away for the way you're skipping. They tried to put me in the ACE program because they thought maybe I was stupid. They put me in like the like bad kid classes in school so that I would go and like I don't know if you remember Miss McDonald. She was like the cheerleading coach. I wrote an essay in her bad kid class and she took it directly to the principal and was like, she can't be in these classes. She's not stupid. Basically, I'm sure there's better terms for that, but they thought maybe I just couldn't understand what was going on in class and that's why I was skipping. And really it was, I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to be doing drugs.
Yep.
So they tried to put me back into normal classes and then I started skipping again. And truancy was getting involved and they were going to take me away from my mother. And my mom, she would drive me to the front door of the school, watch me walk in. And as soon as I would see her leave the parking lot, I would walk back out. Like there was nothing my mom could have done short of quitting her job to hold my hand in high school to keep me there. So, and like that, my mom had a part-time job. My stepfather was a breadwinner. So like my mom really couldn't do that because like her job was like a paraeducator. So she would like take the kids that go to the Barrett Center. She would be their driver. And then she became a paraeducator. So like she really couldn't hold my hand in school. And
Right.
like what parent can?
Right.
I would really like to know what the school thought or the state of Vermont thought. But anywho, so eventually I dropped out. And I was able to drop out a few months before my 16th birthday under the direction that if Essex High School saw me step foot on the property, they would alert the state of Vermont that I hadn't been in school for 2 months. So I had to stay away from Essex High School, which not a big deal. I lived in Grand Isle, so like my mom had no reason to bring me to Essex, but like all of my friends were there. So I would still show up every once in a while. I didn't get caught, but I would still show up because I was also, you know, into small time drug dealing at that point. And eventually I stopped because like I didn't need to go there anymore. And I was, you know, drinking heavily at my parents' house, you know, filling like my stepfather's like vodka up with water, that kind of deal. Like, you know, and he was a big vodka drinker and that poor guy probably stole so much vodka from him. Not, you know, let alone money and stuff. But so anywho, that was my high school career. And I met, you know, people who were like me, dropouts, drank like me, did drugs like me. And I had a vendetta against the world. It was always me against the world. It was me against my parents, things like that. I got a kidney infection at 16 and it gave me, you know, pills because that's what they do when you're in pain. They give you pills. And I remember my mom tried to steal them from me. And I was like, bitch, I will fight you. I've gotten in fist fights with my mom throughout all that. And, you know, I've had to make amends to that for my mom because I win. And nothing is shittier than having to like apologize to your mom for like, hey, I'm really sorry, I like slapped you across the face that time. But luckily I'm able to do that today. So I kind of was like bumbling along for 2 years. Hold on. Sorry, we have a puppy.
Oh.
And he's a fucking shit. But anywho, so yeah, my poor mom. I don't even remember where I was going with that. I just saw Kevin walking by with the shoe and I was like, this little shit. But
So you mentioned you were like bumbling along.
thank you. Yes, I was bumbling along and I was partying every day with my friends and my dad and things like that. I had done, I'd been starting to get heavily into pills. They were a lot easier to get then. Oxy 80s were around. I started getting a habit of those of about 4 a day. And back in the day, they were $80, for an 80 milligrams. So that's a expensive habit for like a 16-year-old to have with no job. At some point, never mind. I'm not going to bring that up because that's like a whole ass other story. I smoked meth for a week somehow in there. I got a job. Yeah. I didn't really like it though, because I was like cleaning shit with a toothbrush and I was like, I don't like staying up for days, which is weird because later on it comes back. But I just remember being like bumbling along for like a few years. And then I met this kid, Michael, and I wound up getting pregnant for my first kid. And I quit everything. And this is very important. Because this set in stone in my mind that I could quit at any time. It was a matter of willpower. So I quit everything, even smoking cigarettes. I quit everything. Michael decided to come live with me and like my parents. My mom really loved him. He helped around the house, things like that. And he was very controlling and narcissistic, and like would count my cigarettes and tell me how many I could have. Or like if I had pills, he would like try to ration those. And I'm like, fuck you, I paid for them. But anywho, I got pregnant at 17 years old. And I had my son a month after my 18th birthday, and I was kind of in this shitty relationship. And something in me changed. I knew what my purpose in life was. It was to be a mom to this kid. And so I'd quit everything, smoking cigarettes. I did like one shot and one more line of cocaine and was like, that's it. And that was it. And my purpose was like to be this kid's mom. Oh my God, my dogs are going to start going crazy. Hold on one moment, because they're going to start going ham. They're like, we're awake now. And Bo thinks he's so big. We have an 85-pound Old English Bulldog, and we have a 20-pound, we don't even know what he is, but he's part German Shepherd, and he's like, must have got mixed up with a Chihuahua or something, because he's like a mini German Shepherd. He's ridiculous. But so anywho, so I found my purpose of to be this kid's mom. But of course, I wasn't pregnant anymore. So I could do drugs again. And what I did is like, I carried that kid around to parties and would put him in another bedroom and have him sleep there and like party all night with my friends. I was an 18-year-old kid with no fucking clue and a drug problem. So like Michael, hung out with my friends. He hung out with the adults, and like we would hang out and like drink and like go to work and do those things. But I also I had gotten my GED and I started working as a nursing assistant. I took a nursing assistant class because I also didn't want to be like working at restaurants or like at the fucking stores in Grand Isle for the rest of my life. I didn't want to be that. So I got my nursing assistant license and I got my GED, and I was going to do all the right things. And I started drinking and partying with my friends, just as my parents did with me. I would bring this kid to the parties and like, I remember my parents did that with me. Like, I did exactly what my parents did because it's all I knew. To be honest, it's all I knew. When my son hit about a year old, I decided I was going to leave his father because I was fucking sick of his shit. He also was trying to control my drug problem. Even though he had one too, he was still trying to control mine. And I didn't like that. Like, first off, you don't control me. Second off, don't touch my fucking drugs, especially when I'm the one paying for them. So that did not end well. It was quite messy. There was a lot going on in that, between like child support court and all this stuff and like my drug problem and all these things. And, it was a fucking mess. And rightfully so, because we were two drug addicts fighting. So it's like you're going for the throat always.
Right.
And I did get full custody of my son, and I met Kevin. So I didn't meet Kevin in high school. I met Kevin, and this is how I met Kevin. My mom was babysitting my son. Actually, the first time I met Kevin was I was getting changed from being in a hot tub, and Kevin was coming to buy drugs from my friend's boyfriend, and he almost walked in on us, and we were like, ah! So that is actually how I first met Kevin. But then when I actually met him, like hung out with Kevin, we were at maybe a New Year's Eve party. Some party. And he had a mirror in his lap and he was lining out cocaine. And he had two girls sitting next to him. And I literally stepped over one of them and inched myself in between Kevin and the girl. And I said, hey, one of those for me? And he said, yep. And we were thick as thieves from that moment on. Because during this time, I also knew who sold his cocaine to him. And I could get it cheaper because I knew that guy's connect. So I always learned how to sell drugs really quickly because it was something I had to do. Mm-hmm. In order to survive and do drugs the way I wanted to, I needed to at least be a middleman. So I did that. And Kevin and I got together. I got an apartment a couple months later, maybe a month later. Kevin moved in because, hey, selling cocaine and living at your parents is tough. And then I also liked cocaine. So Kevin moved in pretty quickly. And we were a pretty toxic relationship because it was built on drugs. So we were pretty shitty, actually. And everyone's always like, oh my God, I want a relationship like yours and Kevin's. I'm like, we went through a lot of shit to get here and it doesn't typically end this way. So,
right.
But, so Kevin and I built our relationship on drugs. And of course, 80s were still big at this point. And I really liked 80s. I was more of a downer fan, a pill addict for a really long time. And man, it's been so long. Like Kevin and I have been together for 13 years. So like looking back at this time, yeah. So looking back at this time feels like a lifetime ago. So I apologize. It's kind of all over the place. And I told myself before I started this, I was like, don't jump around like you're crazy. But I did. So I'm going to start like speeding it up and keeping it short. Cause like, I just think that this part is funny, but not as important as the rest. Kevin and I had a pretty toxic relationship. He sold drugs. I had a place to live. So that was a lot of our time was selling drugs, taking care of my kid. I was trying to go back to school, things like that. I got pregnant for Kevin's first kid, my second, and I couldn't stop using drugs at this point, and I tried. And I thought that there was something wrong with me because the first time I did it, no problem. But the second time I couldn't. So my daughter, Lily, she was born addicted to drugs because I went on Suboxone or buprenorphine at the time. The white ones or whatever. And then I learned that I could sell those too. So what I would do is I would get my doctors to prescribe me because they're not, if you go in there and say you're withdrawing, the doctors aren't going to play games with that. They're not going to say you're a liar and not give you more. And I learned that really quickly because it's very dangerous for women who are addicted to drugs to go into withdrawals while they're pregnant. It's dangerous. It could potentially really harm your baby, potentially kill your baby. So I learned how to get overprescribed so I could take what I needed and sell the rest. And I did that. My daughter Lily, she was born addicted to opiates. Luckily didn't need any methadone to take care of that. But the dirty fact is my daughter was born addicted to opiates. And I did everything I was supposed to. I went to all the counseling. I did the buprenorphine. I did, all the things. And then I would not be pregnant again. And I would decide that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I would come off Suboxone and then I would relapse. And then I got pregnant again. And I had my daughter, Kylie. Kylie also was addicted to opiates because every time I got pregnant, my go-to fix it was I'm going to get on buprenorphine. So every time I would have a child, I would relapse right after because I'm not pregnant anymore. I don't need to feel bad. Not breastfeeding. Don't need to feel bad. And I would go back to partying. And that's exactly what I would do. And my last, two kids, Kylie and Jace, were 100%, all of my kids were like accidents, but like these ones, like I didn't even know, like have a clue until it was like, oh, hey, want to know what you're having? I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So these last two were like, I thought about getting abortions, but would find out that it was too late for that. So, my last two children were born addicted to opiates, and I feel a lot of guilt and shame around that. Just because like I still, a small part of me wants to believe like I didn't have the willpower to stop using. But I know that to be true, but my head likes to be like, hey, you're just a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So my youngest child, Kevin's third child, my fourth. So I had 4 children by the time I was 24 years old. I got my tubes tied, which I look back now and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But then I'm like, I don't want more children. So I'm glad I did that.
Right.
But I also know that. So, from my story, like my getting pregnant was like a fix it for my drug problem.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was accidents or not, I would be able to go and get help. And it was a lot easier to get help when you're pregnant because in Vermont, it's so small. And I don't even know what it looks like now. But even back when I was using, the wait lists were 3 years long and there wasn't help for people. And the only way to really get in and get immediate help was like if you're a pregnant woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like today. I'm sure it's only worse. Unless they've built like 8,000 rehabs and Suboxone clinics, like I'm sure it's worse. But that was my go-to to like fix everything. Was like, okay, I'm pregnant. I'm gonna go get on bupe. We're gonna be fine. And I got my tubes tied on the last one. So when I relapsed again, because I had no program, no higher power, no anything in my life, I had no defense against the first, drug or drink. I had nothing. I had to wait like a normal person now, and that was just fucking impossible.
Yeah.
So I had my last child December 28th of 2013, and that is where my drug addiction started to really take off because oh my god, I love your dog in the back. Sorry.
That's all right.
I'm a dog mom and all I do is dog shit now all the time.
I know. I love my dogs.
We have Bobo the demon, and he's such a fucking demon. We have an 85-pound Old English bulldog named Blue, and all she does is sleep for 18 hours a day and want to do nothing. And Bobo is maybe 5 months, and we don't know what he is, but he's a fucking demon.
Terrorize.
All he does is terrorize her. He's like, play with me and bites on her face fat all the time.
Sounds like Finn. Yeah.
Oh, he's like, but hey, mom, you could not do this. You could hang out with me.
You would love that.
But so I had my child and I came off bupe for the last time because I had the idea that bupe was like a ball and chain. I couldn't travel without having what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do anything. Like I had to, go pee in a cup places, which I hated. I hated people having control over my life. That wasn't me because I had this giant delusion that I was in control of everything always.
Right.
And I could control things in my favor because I was also a master manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
And I did control a lot of people without them realizing because I was just a manipulator.
Right.
So let's see. I stopped my bupe and everything in the beginning of 2014, and I started using drugs again. However, perk 30s were like a big thing. And when they got rid of Oxycontin 80s, which was around this time, the price of 30s skyrocketed. So you went from paying $15 a pill to $50 a pill just for a fucking tiny Percocet 30, some bullshit. Fucking Vermont, man. Y'all are fucking thieves. But anywho, but fucking $50. And me and Kevin had a fucking drug problem. So it's not just one person. You got to supply everybody. And we were doing, probably like $300 to $600 a day and 30s. And like, how can you afford that with 4 kids and try to get up and like parent and do, like, you can't afford to be sick when you're trying to parent. You can't. You just can't. And if you are someone out there that is sick and parenting, holy fuck, my hat is off to you, because I couldn't fucking do it.
Yeah.
But there is another way. So anywho, a friend of mine said, hey, I got this bag of heroin. And I was really afraid of heroin because like my mom had drilled in my head for a long time that my dad was a heroin addict and all this stuff. And I should mention that when I had my first child, I reached out to my biological father because I had hated him. And I said, hey, I want you to be a part of my kid's life. And he did. My dad was my best friend from that point on because we did drugs together. And so he was my best friend and my using buddy. And my kids gave him a purpose in life again. And, he lived in a motel efficiency by himself and he was on disability. And so he like had nothing. And my kids and I gave him purpose again. So he was my best friend and he was my ride or die, there for it all. And, he did drugs. So like my dad benefited from that too. So, when I was really afraid of heroin because my dad was a heroin addict. And my mom used to tell me that all the time because she wanted me to hate him as much as she hated him. And I didn't. Turns out I didn't. But so I was afraid of heroin. So when someone said, hey, I can't get you perk 30s, but I got a bag of heroin for $20 and it's going to rock your socks off. And I was that sick and I had kids to take care of. I just said, okay. And I did it. And that's exactly what happened. One bag, $20, got Kevin and I so fucked up that I like almost like couldn't even parent my children. Like one bag got us that fucked up. And I was like, okay, like this is manageable. Like we could do like a bag a day and like be fine. But I have never met any drug on this fucking planet that has wrapped its fingers like around my soul, basically. I would never suggest, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy because you know what? Like with pills, I could go sick. I could still get up and function when I was sick from pills. But from heroin, I couldn't. If I was sick from heroin, I was on the couch throwing up, pooping my pants, literally wishing for death, restless legs, like the flu times 1,000, but there's a way to make it stop. So the mental obsession was way worse than anything I've ever experienced. And my mom didn't get it. And that's how I explained it to her. It was like, imagine you have the flu times like 1,000, but that around the corner, there's something to make it all stop.
Right.
And that is exactly what heroin was to me. So with my fancy dancy drug dealing skills, I always hooked up with the right people. I got the right crowds in my eyes, and as a drug addict's eyes, the right people, the right crowd. So I within 3 weeks about of doing that first bag, I had people from New York City coming to use my house as a trap. And not just like one crew of people, it'd be like a couple. And like, for listeners, I hope that you know what a trap house is, but if you don't, it's where people come and sell drugs out of your house and use it as like a work spot. It's like an office setting, right. But basically from that moment, it took 8 months for heroin to ruin my life. And that's it. I have never been more in love with a substance in my life than heroin, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And to this day, I still love heroin. To this day, I love it so much that I will ruin my entire fucking life for it. And that right there is why I can't fuck around. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything because I'm so afraid of what will happen if I go back.
I love how you mentioned that you're in love with it.
I
You know what
am.
I mean? Like, it's fucked up to say because we're in sobriety for so long and we've been in it for so long that we shouldn't love it, but that's how I am with cocaine. I love it so much. I know I can't just have one line or even a puff of marijuana because that marijuana is going to lead me right to that line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I tried everything else. And my mom tried to give me everything else. And my dad tried to say, just drink. And I tried it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me. I love heroin. And like, that is what I will go back to. And I know that today. And that's why I don't do anything.
Right.
Because this is what it turned my life into. So February 11th of 2015, I hit my first bottom. I was evicted from my apartment with guns drawn by the police because the police knew what was going on at my house and they needed to protect themselves. And I didn't leave in time. So they knew people were still there. So they were afraid to come in my house without guns drawn. And, my kids were taken from me that day. DCF got involved because the cops obviously found shit. They didn't find, anything really worth it enough to charge me with it. And they were probably like, hey, like your life's about to be shit anyways, and felt bad. Not gonna lie.
Right.
So
Right.
they didn't charge me with anything, but they did remove me from my home and all of my kids' things and everything in my life that was important. Photos, everything, the things that I didn't have room to get out were all thrown in the garbage, which is, I'm not blaming the police. That was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't pay your bills and you don't take care of what you need to, like, this is what happens.
But
And
listen, you've mentioned this before with your parents. Like, I don't blame my parents. I don't blame the police. But when you were in early sobriety, were you blaming the police?
oh, absolutely. It was
Yeah.
everybody's fault. It was not my fault. I was the victim. Oh my
Mhm.
God. I am the victim of my own shit. And I just couldn't see. I was so delusional in early recovery.
Mhm.
Um,
That's something to mention because I feel like that's with a lot of us. And it's not until we take accountability for our actions, that's at least when I was really able to blossom in my recovery and self exploration and stuff.
I absolutely, and that's why I want to get to like where my recovery is, because I started learning how to take like accountability, and I started learning how to work with acceptance, because this story doesn't have a happy ending.
Mhm.
I mean, it does in a sense, but like when I hear most people, when they're like, oh, my kids were taken, I didn't get my kids back. I never got my kids back. My kids were adopted. Their names are changed. I don't know where a couple, a few of them are. Like, I'm not allowed. Like, there's no happy ending. I didn't get the kids back. I didn't get everything, that I wanted just because I got sober. And I had this like delusion that I would. And it's the fucking plain simple truth. I didn't get the happy ending. I didn't get my family back. And like, but hey, I hit 6 years of recovery on the 28th.
Yeah.
Like, if I can fucking get sober through all that and stay sober and learn how to accept things and live life on life's terms, like anybody fucking can. Like,
Yeah.
I swear anyone can.
Amazing.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. So, I lost the kids. Long story short, I lost the kids. I went to rehab 8 times in a year, and I met my sponsor because I went to Maple Leaf like 5 times. I met my sponsor, Laura K. And oh man, she was the bitch I needed. But but anywho, we'll get more to that. I met her a lot. And I went to, Serenity House, and I went to Brattleboro Retreat for a spin dry. And there's another rehab I feel like that I went to, but I
Valley
can't.
Vista.
Yeah, I went there for like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dude, I've got some funny shit about Valley Vista. So basically, we'll get there though. So Kevin and I were trying to go to rehab, and Kevin was trying to get sober. I was trying to get sober, and we were each other's downfall. He would get sober at a place, he'd come out, and I'd already relapsed, so he'd relapse with me. Same deal. And then Kevin, while I was in rehab, actually got into some trouble, robbing a store with a friend who had a gun, and he went to jail. And so I was then alone, without my kids, without my, basically husband. and I didn't know how to cope. So things got pretty crazy there for a while. I was picked up by the DEA at one point. At one point, Secret Service and the Marshal Service showed up at my house before I was evicted over murder charges for the people that I was like working with. And like, I went through a lot of crazy shit during my heroin addiction. And I still never got, the kids back. I wouldn't rat on people because I was afraid of what that meant. And I don't think people understand. They're like, oh, if I lost my kids, I would rat to get them back. The people that I was messing with, if I did that, I would have painted a giant target, not on my back per se, but like on my entire family. And like, I don't think people realize in Vermont, because it's like not as hard in Vermont, but like that shit is very real outside of Vermont. If you go into a city and like you really look around, like the murders and stuff are very real. Like Vermont has like a safety bubble, and I love that because it's so nice when you visit, you feel safe and cozy, but like people don't fuck around. So I wasn't about to fuck around and find out.
Right.
So Kevin went to jail. I was really alone. Kevin actually got out and went to Valley Vista. So I went to try Valley Vista, and I left Kevin high and dry at Valley Vista. See ya. Had a friend come get me, was like, deuces, dude, good fucking luck. And Kevin got sober in November. He went to Valley Vista. He went to an Oxford house. And thank God that he went to the Oxford house at the right time, because the people that lived in that house, they knew me from being in rehab with me, because a lot of them had. Yeah. And they knew, like what Kevin and I were going through. And they kind of surrounded him and like would UA him whenever he saw me, because I was not sober at that time. And like, luckily he had a really great group of men around to like kind of coddle him. Yeah. Like hold his hand and like hold him accountable. And I just remember looking at Kevin and like seeing so much disappointment. And like, we had already lost our kids. I knew I was going to lose Kevin if I didn't get my shit together. And then I almost killed my dad. So basically what happened is I gave my dad something that wasn't heroin, and it gave him a blood infection and traveled to his heart. And my dad was put in the ICU. My dad had heart problems. And that's what he was on disability for. So it was very close to killing him. And I was, the entire time my dad was in the ICU, my using buddy, my best friend, I was stealing checks from him and getting, myself situated while my dad was basically dying in an ICU room. So my dad woke up from that, thank fucking God, because I know in my heart that if my dad died right then, I don't think I would have survived to sit here and talk with you at all. That guy was the only person who didn't turn his back on me when I lost my kids. Everyone else did. And, the islands, everyone talked about me, and, my son still lives up there. So, I do know about a couple of my kids, but not that much. And who knows, maybe the future will change that. You never know. Like my higher power will, work that out as necessary. And if they hate me, like, that's fine too. I've also come to, work on acceptance. It's like, hey, it is what it is. But, God, feel free to shorten this when you edit, please.
No. My dogs are going to start barking for some reason, as if there's someone outside, but there's not. So if they
love that. Listen, my dogs do that too. Love that.
Dogs. But no, going, you're totally fine. If the viewers don't like it, then they can skip it. I'm enjoying myself.
But so my dad died or almost died. And I know that if he had died in that moment, I wouldn't be sober. I don't think I would have recovered from that, because my dad was the only person on this planet who didn't turn his back on me. I was homeless, but it was what I would consider a soft homeless, because my dad let me stay in his like efficiency apartment in fucking Colchester, in this shitty efficiency place of like, I slept on the floor for a really long time, but like I was homeless essentially. You know, like I had nothing anymore. You know, I had trash bags of clothing that, man, were rough. But my dad woke up in the ICU. So basically, my dad woke up from the ICU and they put him on a normal unit. And my dad woke up and called me and said, "You better bring me some drugs." I was like, "You should be getting better shit than I'm getting." But anywho,
You should be bringing me the drugs.
yeah. So I told him I spent all his money, and he had to call, you know, his mom his mom, who bailed us out of a lot of shit. My grandmother, that poor woman, bailed us out of a lot of shit. She stopped me from getting evicted like 3 times prior to when I actually got evicted, totaling like $10,000 at the very least, could be more. And so she gave him money because he told her, like, "Hey, Leigh-Ann spent all my money." So she gave him money and I got him drugs. And I went up to this hospital at Fletcher Allen and I was in this room and I'm on a locked unit because apparently my dad was quite combative, like when he was out of it, which makes sense because my dad used to be an abusive drunk. So like get him all fucked up and he's probably going to be a little combative naturally. And I'm on this fucking locked unit and I'm 105 pounds and I'm wearing 00 jeans at this point, and my skin color is just gray. And I look back at those photos now, I'm like, holy shit. How the hell did those fucking hospital people just not ban me? And I'm in this bathroom with my dad in my dad's little shit room. And you know, he's dragging a fucking IV pole in there. So we're doing great at this point in my life. And my dad had the missing tip of a finger. So it was a lot easier for me to hit my dad than for him to hit himself, but he would do it if I wasn't around. He was just a princess, basically. So I, you know, hit my dad and I hit myself. And I just like remember like having this fucking clear moment of looking in the mirror in this fucking bathroom in Fletcher Allen and just thinking to myself, like, what are you fucking doing? Like, who are you? I didn't even recognize myself in this mirror. And I close my eyes and I think back to this moment because like it still gives me chills to this day because I remember it so vividly. Like, what are you doing? Who the fuck are you? And just like thinking to myself, like if a nurse walks in this room right now, all they got to do is hit a button and the cops are coming for me. And like I was just like, oh man, I had this like overwhelming sense of like, what the fuck? And you know, from that moment, I don't really remember what happened in the next few days. But you know, like I was like shooting heroin in front of Kevin, who was sober. He was like 6 months sober. This is March. You know, I lost my kids and I signed away the rights to my children in the beginning of March. And then in the middle of March, because my son was from a previous relationship, so I signed over the rights to all my kids. My dad almost died. And I just was like, what the fuck? And my dad told me like, hey, I'm not going to be at my house. Like I'm going to go to Connecticut and hang out with like my mom and my family until I get like a little better. And I just was like, I'm fucked. Like I'm going to be alone. You know, Kevin's going to leave me. My dad's like going to Connecticut. Like I just signed away the rights to my kids. And, you know, 4 days later, you know, my dad went to Connecticut, and then 4 days after that, March 28th of 2016, I walked into rehab for the last time. As of right now, the last time, because there's always that chance of, you know, relapse, or there's always that chance, you know, I relapsed so many times before. Just because I hit 6 years of sobriety doesn't mean that I am free from relapse. It is still a very real thing in my life today. I very well could go out and use tomorrow. Who knows? So I walked into rehab for the last time. It's Maple Leaf. And I don't know if you remember this. About a month later, they got shut down for insurance fraud. I was there while they were like, the people were like pulling files from there. It was fucking wonderful.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Sure do.
It's so sad because a lot of like the counselors and things were fucking wonderful. And I absolutely adored them. But you know, for the first time in my life, I finally was so defeated. You know, I almost killed somebody. I just signed over the rights to my kid. My husband was sober and was most like, well, he wasn't my husband at the time. My fiance at the time was sober and gonna leave me. Like I finally, you know, had enough. I was tired of waking up every day and crying because I woke up. You know, at the end, I had a $1,500 a day habit. And I couldn't afford it.
Mm.
And I just wanted to die, but I didn't have the balls to pull the trigger, you know?
Mhm.
So I walked into rehab for the last time, and, you know, they knew me by first name. I had been there 5 times in the past year. They knew the deal. I went there sick. They would give me my Suboxone by noon every time I showed up there. Like they knew the deal, and which is not like cool. Like that's what the fuck? Like that's not cool at all. It's really depressing actually, but you know, they knew me by name, they knew my fucking game. And this time I just sat down, shut up and listened and did everything these people had to say. You know, anything my counselor told me to do, I would do it. I would go to all the meetings. I would raise my hand and bawl my eyes out about the kids. And I still tear up about that because like I still hold a lot of shame and guilt around that.
Yeah.
I can manage it today without drugs and alcohol, which is wonderful, but I still hold a lot with that. So like I would cry and raise my hand and cry about it. And Laura fucking K was always there with Josh, and they would be always at the Maple Leaf meetings. They were always bringing a meeting there, and she looked happy and she had a Michael Kors purse. And I just remember being like, she's got her shit together. Over a Michael Kors purse. Yeah, that's right. That's how shallow I was at that point though. Like she looks like maybe she's got her shit together. And you know, they were laughing and joking and smiling, and they always showed up. And I asked her one more time, like, hey, please sponsor me. And she said, yeah, but I think you should go to sober living. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Because I was just so broken. And I watched the Oxford House work for Kevin, and I was so broken, and I just wanted anything on this fucking planet to give me some form of relief. I was willing to try anything. And like that was the key. Was before I wasn't willing.
Mhm.
I was there for getting the kids back, or I was there for, you know, look good for court that was coming up. Like and this time I was just so fucking broken that I had like an ounce of willingness, and that was all, you know, I needed. That was all my higher power needed. That's all the program needed, was just a little bit of willingness.
Right.
And I just said, okay, I'll go to the sober house. And that's what I did. You know, I left Maple Leaf. I actually graduated, which I never did before. I always got thrown out, kicked out, would leave of my own accord. And I finally, I graduated Maple Leaf, and I went to the Women's Oxford House on Bright Street. I don't even know if they still do that anymore. I really hope they do. But I went to, you know, Bright Street, and I fucking did whatever people told me, even when I didn't want to. Because I did a chore 5 minutes late one time there and got fucking thrown on a 30 and 30 contract over some bullshit. And I was so mad about it, but I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Laura said, hey, call me every day for a week. And I called her every day for 4 months. I volunteered at the Turning Point because you have to, when you live in the Oxford House, you have to do some work, volunteer, whatever.
Yep.
And, you know, my grandmother put up the security deposit for me the one that, you know, enabled my behavior for so long. She put up the down payment, and they were helping pay my rent in the beginning. And man, I was at least able, when I finally left there, I was at least able to give her money back and make that amends. Like, hey, like, look, I fucking did it. They didn't eat my fucking security deposit.
Right. Right.
But, you know, I immediately, let your dogs in. Oh,
I don't know if you can hear them.
I can't.
Okay, good.
But I was just so desperate, and I immediately started working with Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is how I got sober, and this is how I've stayed sober. And this is, you know, through the program of AA, you know, because like by myself, I can't do shit. I really can't. I'm miserable. I can also bring this up later. But when I first went through the steps, Laura brought me through word for word. We read, oh my God, in embarrassing places like Panera on
Yes.
Church Street. Like Panera or fucking Starbucks or like, and I'd be like so embarrassed because I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting sober. This is so not cool. And I'm 26 years old, living in a sober house with 7 other women. And I was so just like, it was such a shot to my pride. I would have rather been homeless than reading a fucking AA book in a fucking Panera. It was such a shot to my pride. And I think she knew that. Which is good because she needed to shatter that, delusion of fucking pride I had.
Yeah.
Where like, who cares what other people think? And I remember, she finally like asked me like, are you an addict or an alcoholic, and is your life unmanageable? And that was like the hard part for me, is like, I was proud to be an addict. I could do more drugs than you. I could drink more than you. And I was this 100-pound, 5'4" little thing. Like, but I could outdrink and outdrug anybody. And I wore that like a badge of honor. So like that, I knew that was okay. I was like, yeah, definitely. But is your life unmanageable? I had managed my life for so long. I always found a way. I was always scheming. I always found a way to, get high. I always found a way to, pay the bill. I always found a way to do this. And if I was breathing, that meant my life was manageable still.
Right.
So that part of step 1 was like so hard for me to grasp. And then, it just finally hit me, I had to like pray every morning and do morning, readings, and every night when I retired, like all the readings in the big book I had to do every day. 3rd, 7th step prayers, like all of them every day. And one morning it hit me like, I'm living in a fucking sober house. Like I lost all my children. Like clearly, like things aren't fucking manageable at this point. Like there's nothing left to manage. And it's either I'm going to die or I'm going to figure it out. And like, there's a small part of me that didn't want to die. So, I took that and ran. And the first time, so I've gone through the steps a few times in 6 years, and it's always different because, today my first run through is very different. I have different problems today than I did back then. Back then I was just trying so hard not to fucking do drugs for 24 hours. And, the sober house I was at was like 2 houses up from a place I used to drop drugs to. So like a lot of my clients I would see there. Like I was white knuckling fucking everything. Like I would hold those chairs for dear fucking life. And I would cry a lot about my kids and how the state of Vermont fucked me over, which is not the case in the end. But, I would just cry about losing my kids. And don't get me wrong, looking back at it, the state of Vermont could have done some definite things. I do feel in my case, because it was so close to when that baby was murdered by its mother over drugs and stuff, that they didn't really give my case like the time of day that it deserved. But it doesn't mean that I lost my children because of them. Right. I think both parties maybe fucked up a little bit. me more than them.
Yeah.
Me more than them. But I didn't really give them a reason to give me the time of day. But it is whatever. I mean, it's not whatever. It is what it is. But I've learned to like come with acceptance, like, hey, like maybe I should have just got my shit together.
Right.
Simple solve. But the state of Vermont really fucked me over back then. Back then I believed that everyone fucked me over.
Yep.
Because I didn't know how to take accountability. And I didn't learn how to until I did a 4th step. But my 2nd step, my sponsor, Laura, she said, "You believe in a higher power?" I said, "Fuck no, fuck God, fuck this, fuck that." And she was like, "Do you believe that I believe in a higher power?" I said, "I believe you believe." And she goes, "You think my higher power works out for me?" I said, "Well, probably. I mean, you look like you've got, your life together." She's like, "Okay, that's all I need." And she's like, "I don't care if you believe in anything, like you're just going to pray. You're just going to meditate. Like you're going to do the actions until something changes."
Right.
And like, because I didn't believe, I grew up in an Irish Catholic household and we were forced to believe in something. And I even to this day, I don't believe in like the man with the strings and the pulling them from fucking some cloud thrown up there. I don't believe in that shit. I'm more of a universe kind of lady. I'm more of a universe kind of lady. So, and like, that's okay. And, you know, my higher power, it's actually changed over time, and it's changed multiple times, but we'll get into that later too. So, you know, that was all she needed. And then when we got to step 3, oh my God, she embarrassed me even more. She's like that mom that just like and chooses to embarrass you in front of your friends.
Yep.
So she took me to the park and like on the waterfront, and it was like probably June or something like that. She took me to like the fucking park, like where the boardwalk is, and like all the people are there because it's summer. She made me get on my knees in the middle of this fucking park and do the 3rd step prayer. And I was mortified. I was absolutely fucking mortified.
So I gotta tell you, now that you hit that and you hit the Panera, so my first sponsor, we were doing book work in Panera as well.
I love that.
She made me do my 3rd step, hit my knees in fucking Panera.
Oh
and say the 3rd step prayer. And then we did the 5th and 6th step in one of the bars downtown. She's like, you can go. She's like, you can go anywhere if you have a purpose, and we have a purpose because we're doing book work. I'm like, hey, sure.
Okay, this is fine. I was mortified. I'm like, all these people are looking at us. I'm like, bitch, you got me out here praying to gods I don't believe in. I'm like, oh my God. But at the end, she said, yeah, I understand if you don't believe in a higher power yet. She said, this is just a commitment to work the rest of the steps. Are you going to work them? And I said, yeah, because you know what did I have to lose at this point? Like I was, you know, maybe like 90 days sober at this point. Like I couldn't put together, you know, 90 minutes before. And like all of a sudden I was accumulating days. And like that was a big deal to me in the beginning. Like I would count the days, the minutes, the hours, because you know what, like the obsession hadn't been lifted yet. And all I wanted to do was drink and drug. And I would literally watch my friends pick up drugs from the house 2 houses down. Like literally people would stop me in the street and be like, hey, like, are you good yet? Like asking if I would like score for them or give up phone numbers and shit. And I was like, oh, hell no. Because the reservation for me for a long time was like, I'm not going to give up these phone numbers because if I go back out, I'm going to need these suckers. So, and I held a lot of reservations in the beginning. Like if Kevin goes back out, like I'll definitely go. Things like I'm going to hold these phone numbers just in case I go back out. Like I need a backup plan. Like if, you know, my dad, you know, if my dad, something happens to him, like I'm going to go back out. Things like that. And, you know, like the hardest part about me moving into sober living and working the steps is I had to learn how to create boundaries with my dad. You know, my dad was more of an alcoholic than a heroin addict, and I was more of a heroin addict than an alcoholic. So my dad drank every day. But like he partied too, when he could afford it, you know, the 3rd of the month disability. So like I knew he was still drugging, and like drinking even bothered me at this point because I just wanted some fucking relief.
Right.
Like it didn't matter what it was at this point. I probably would have, oh my God, you could have handed me anything and I just would have been like, yep. But I was just like, I had to learn how to set boundaries with my dad. And my dad was my best friend and the only person that kept me from hitting a true bottom. Although I did hit a true bottom, but like even farther down.
Right.
And he, for me to be like, hey, like I can't hang out with you. I can't be around you right now. Broke my fucking heart and his too, because I had lost my kids and then he was losing me too. So like my poor dad like lost like his purpose. So I held a lot of guilt with that too. You know, my dad like was always around for the kids. Like my dad would show up at my house to basically make sure I wasn't so fucked up that I couldn't take care of my kids type shit. So like that was his purpose, was like taking care of his daughter and the 4 fucking kids. So daycare. Yeah, pretty much. And like obviously like my dad scored, so like there was like an underlying, you know, thing there from being an addict as well. But like my dad showed up every day before I lost my apartment, and then kept me from being homeless. So like setting that boundary and being like, hey, like I can't be around you. And like having to make amends to, my dad in the end was also a pain in the ass, but we'll talk about that when I get to amends. It was just like learning. This program gave me a lot of gifts, like learning how to set healthy boundaries, and not only setting the boundaries, but holding boundaries, because that was a big thing for me. Is I would set a boundary and then someone would overstep it, and I would, because the people pleaser in me would be like, whatever. And when I learned that I was a people pleaser, man, was I heartbroken, because I thought I didn't give a fuck about anyone or anything. And I thought I was just this hard, feral creature, because that's what I was in early recovery. I didn't know how to, make dinner for myself anymore. When I lost the kids, like I didn't need to make dinner every night. I didn't need to make breakfast every morning. Like I stopped doing that for myself, and I stopped doing that for Kevin, and I stopped doing that in general. I ate handfuls of Kick cereal because that's what I got from WIC. And that's how I was 105 pounds. I stopped doing normal things like cleaning up after myself, laundry, showering daily, brushing my teeth every day. Even like if I thought it was going to blow my high, I wouldn't do it. So showering and eating were like two big things that I just didn't do. My hair when I got sober was like one dreadlock, and it was down to my waist. So it was like an interesting dreadlock. It took like hours to get out. It was rough. And when I did step 3 and got embarrassed in front of all these fucking people and made a commitment to go through the rest of the steps, and that meant my 4th step, all of that came out. All my resentments against the state of Vermont, my parents, because I did blame my parents for my disease for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I've learned to not necessarily blame them, but I acknowledge that, my parents did the best they could with the skills they were taught. And I use those same skills to lose my own children. So like, it was partially ingrained in my environment, but I also firmly believe that I grew up and had the disease because I was always a sensitive, uncomfortable kid. And I didn't want to be a part of my family, and I people pleased, and I did all the things that, are characteristics of the alcoholic and drug addict. And I believe that when I finally found that relief in drugs, that it was just meant to be. That was it. It was over. Something in me clicked, that allergy happened. And, that phenomena of craving, like that was live in me the first time I drank and did drugs. So when I did the 4th step, I learned that, because I did blame everyone. I blamed Kevin for not getting the kids back, because Kevin lost our kids when he was sober. He had a felony over his head, and they were like, if you go back to jail, we don't really think you'll be a fit parent. So they made him sign his rights over. And they say that, we signed them over of our own free will, but there's a lot of like, hey, if you don't, we're going to drag you and your children and everyone you hold dearly, like through a trial. And like, I knew that what they had on me. There's no doubt in my mind. I knew. So I didn't want to put my children through that. And I blamed Kevin for not. It wasn't my fault. It was his. Fuck Kevin, right?
Yeah. Damn it, Kevin.
Yeah, fucking Kevin. And like, I learned, my first 4 step was like a fucking notebook. I had a whole ass notebook of fucking resentments. Not only resentments, but like of fucking people. I had like a huge list, things I was holding on to from fucking grade school.
Yep.
I'm like, that time, the girls were mean to me and I was alone or whatever. Like, or that time that bitch stole that pen from me. Like shit like that made it on there. It was so petty. And it's so funny because my nickname, like my online nickname is Petty. But, it was just so eye-opening because I was like, wow, I can't believe I've been holding on to this for so long. Anything my brothers did, anyone close to me made it on that list. And there were things that I put on there, I've had to deal with like sexual abuse growing up, and I blamed it on my alcoholism and me as a person, not, necessarily the other people. And through outside help, I will put in the plug for outside help, because I do believe that the steps can help you, but they can only help you so much. And if you have to get outside help, please just fucking do it. Mental health is so important. Uh,
For real.
I love my therapist, but I can't afford one right now.
Oh, awful.
I know the American health, care system is wonderful. Just gonna say that too. So great. Love it. But I will put the plug in because I have gotten outside help. Throughout the 6 years of my recovery, there have been times where I've needed to go get outside help, and that's okay. But this 4-step really opened my eyes, not only to what I was holding on to, but then all of a sudden I got to the list of like, what was my fucking part in it? When I lost my kids went into my mother's custody, and my mom, something happened. I'm not going to go into it. And my mom lost custody of my kids, and that's what really started the timer. So I held on to that against my mother for a long time. But what the hell is my part in that? If I didn't lose my kids in the first place, my mom never would have had to take care of 3 small children at the age of 56. Like, come on. Those big ones that I was holding on to, being able to how do I want to put it? Because I hate when people say I forgive them. I don't really forgive them, but it doesn't affect me anymore. But like the people who victimized me in sexual abuse, I don't necessarily forgive them, but it also doesn't affect me anymore. I've come to accept like what has happened, and I would never let that happen again with them even. But like I've come to like learn that that doesn't have to define me as a woman or as like a victim anymore. I don't have to be a victim. I'm more of a survivor of those situations. And like that is freeing, because I was such a victim before, and I couldn't take accountability for anything. Everything happened to me. And like looking at a 4-step with all these resentments and being like, holy fuck, I was a piece of shit. Oh my God. Wow. And like being able to like look and take accountability for my own actions, and like learning like what these character defects meant and how they affect me even today. So like people pleasing or manipulation, like all of those, I kind of wore those character defects as like a suit of armor.
Right.
And those character defects protected me for so long. And really learning what they were about in my 5th step, which luckily we did in a house, not in a bar. We did that in a house. Yeah, I know. And luckily, like Laura, her husband, is also in recovery. So he like, went away for the day with like the boys and like did stuff. So it was just us in the house too. So that was really nice. I cried and read all of this to my sponsor, and she really didn't give a shit. Like, not that she didn't give a shit that I was crying and stuff, but like, she was like, oh, that's not so bad. Like all those things that I was holding on to that were like my deep, dark secrets, man. She was like, meh, this is what I did. And I was like, oh my God, you want to be the same. And just like having her like, do 6 and 7, like learning what So like learning like what those character defects and that not only how they protected me, but how they also how I use them as a weapon. Because for me, like those character defects, like I didn't only use them as a suit of armor, like the I don't give a fuck attitude, my manipulation, people pleasing, my anger, like justified or not, all those fucking things, like drama queen, all of those, like how I weaponize them against people as well. And not only did they affect me, they obviously affected others in a great way. And I was able to make some really cool amends. Like, my mom, like I forgave my mom for all the things that happened with my kids, because it wasn't my mom's fault. It was mine. Right. My dad wasn't around when I was young because he was a partier, but then, was a drug addict with me. Like I was able to like forgive his alcoholism basically, and like understand that like my dad and I are 2 peas in a fucking pod. Like, a lot of the things he did were because he's a drug addict, and, he's just doing the best he could. And I get that because I also lived it. And not only that, the most important is like forgiving myself, because I lost those kids and I did a lot of shitty things to, Kevin, my parents. Like I robbed my parents and, not being a good sister to my brothers, and like, Kevin, and treating him like shit, and like basically shooting heroin in front of him when he was just so trying to stay sober and not go back to jail. And like I used to hate myself every day. I would wake up and I would hate who I was, and I would be really upset that I didn't die the night before. And I forgive myself today for being a shitty mom. And like that's the big one.
Mhm.
And like that one I might cry about. But like I wasn't a good parent. I believed to my core that I was, even as a drug addict. My kids didn't go without. Like my kids were fed, all that. They had all that. But like I wasn't there for them emotionally, and I was a monster emotionally.
Mhm.
And like I forgive myself for that today.
Mhm.
Some days are better than others, because some days I can like look in the rear view mirror and feel really sad about it. And like that's okay though. Like that's the thing. It's like I can feel sad about things, but I just
Mhm.
don't have to live in it. I don't have to live in that self-pity anymore.
Right.
Because man, I love self-pity. I love it. I still to this day I have a guilty pleasure of self-pity.
It's nice and warm.
It's so
cute
warm.
shit.
and then painful. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something about it now. Because
Mhm.
I love pain apparently. But like I was able to make some like really cool amends. Also, Laura had me make fucking amends, dude, to Walmart and Rite Aid back when it was Rite Aid on the corner, not whatever it is now. She had me go in there and be like, hey, I stole an eyeliner from you guys probably like 2 years ago. I'm here to make amends. How can I write that? And they were like, I thought I was gonna get arrested. They were like, just don't do it again. And then fun fact, I did the same thing at Walmart, and I had to go in there and say, hey, I never personally stole from you, but I sent people here to steal from you, because I used to trade drugs for Christmas presents and shit. And they were like, let's get the AP people. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to jail. I had Ellen sit out in the fucking parking lot. I'm like, keep the car running, bitch. Because if they try to arrest me, I'm running. I'm not even joking. And she was like, what? It was so funny. And so I went in there to talk to AP, and the AP was someone I used to sell coke to back in the day. I was like, no, they were like, we thought you were dead. So it was actually a really wholesome moment. They were like, hey, obviously, like, don't do that. Like, keep doing what you're doing. But like, we thought you were dead when you lost the kids. So glad to see you're trying to do something right. And man, those amends. I was so embarrassed. I was fucking mortified. Then let's see. So 10, 11, and 12. I'm not the greatest. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not the greatest at 10 step. I have to work on it, because I'm just not that great at it. 11 and 12 I'm better at, because meditating is easy for me now. It wasn't easy for me then. And I did a lot of guided meditations because I just couldn't figure it out, and learned like that's okay. Like if you're learning to meditate, like that's okay. And I learned how to be able to be quiet and help other women. And I've helped other women in the community in Vermont. I still talk to one of my old sponsees. I love her. And I help women here too, which is great. I used to work for a transitional living home here. I don't anymore because it was night shift and it was crushing my soul. But like, in my program, I'm able to be there for other people, which I couldn't do before. And I was a mess. And like what my life is like today is like, hey, like I don't hate myself. I don't want to kill myself. I moved out of Vermont in 2019 and I moved to Connecticut, and man, I went into a deep depression and I went really dry. And I was just as miserable as I was when I was first getting sober. Like I just wanted to die every day. And I got into fight or flight and I ran to Texas, because my brother lives down here. And I was fucking miserable. I just wanted to die again. And it's like, that's what happens when I go dry. And like, I was real close to like, not necessarily do something about it, but like, I could feel like I was ready to drink. So I started going to AA down here, and I have the most wonderful sponsor, and she's like the nicest lady, and the way they do the steps is so different. Which I hated in the beginning because I'm also a judgmental person.
Yep.
That doesn't go away just because I want it to. I got to do work around it, which I have been. So that's been a lot nicer. But I was so judgmental when I came down here. And I moved to Dallas, and they do everything different and backwards. And sometimes I find myself being like, well, that's not how you're supposed to do it. And then I'm like, who the hell are you? Like the AA police? Like, I don't think so. And my life is so different today. I actually work in a vet's office now, as a receptionist, and it's the greatest job ever.
Oh,
It's literally the greatest job ever. I go to meetings. I do some online ones too that I really enjoy. And I do some in person with my home group here. And it's 80 degrees. Hold on. Let's see what is it right now? It's like 85 degrees yesterday. Let's see what it's like today. Oh, it's 65 right now. It's supposed to be 80 later. So
cute.
I'm
It's
not
31 here.
I'm telling you, get out of Vermont.
I know.
Don't get me wrong, I love Vermont. When I go back there, I feel a little claustrophobic because of how small it is.
Yeah.
But man, my life, all the material things came back. I can say that. Like, I have the apartment, I've got the 2 dogs, I've got the husband. Kevin and I got married before we left Vermont. Like, we've been together for 13 years. You don't want a relationship like ours because it was so toxic in the beginning. 2 drug addicts trying to get sober, trying to get sober, trying to stay sober. It's a shit show. But it's our shit show. And our lives are much different now. We have the 2 dogs. I have a nice car. He's got actually a nice car. Like, we have the apartment in the gated community with pool, and like Texas is way cheaper, although the government here sucks. Just gonna put that out there. They're fucking idiots, but hey, like, we're able to move. Like, we're able to show up for other people. I'm able to show up when I say I'm going to. When I tell my sponsor, like, hey, we want to get together at 2, like, I show up at that time. Before, I couldn't. I made Laura wait one time, and I had to run home, literally run, because I didn't have a license, to meet her because I forgot, and she was a bitch about it, and I'll never forget it. But I ran and I did it, and we met, and she was like, okay, don't fucking do it again. And like, I'm able to show up for other women. When someone asks me to do a podcast, man, it's 8:00 in the morning in Texas. I'm like, on my day off, yep, I will be there at 8 a.m.
Well, I think you have the perfect sponsor because Laura, she is fucking badass.
Oh, she's a badass.
And when I first met her, she just had just the strongest bond with so many individuals. And I think she gifted you with that, because now look at you, able
Absolutely
to show up and be there for other people and support other women. I think you had such a great role model for that.
Oh my God, absolutely. She used to scare the shit out of me. But she was the only person that I wound up trusting in the beginning.
Yeah.
And like, that's all I needed. And she is a very trustworthy woman. She doesn't, gossip. Like, that was like a big thing that I was like worried about. She doesn't gossip. And even if she does, then she makes amends for it. Like, she was an absolute wonderful sponsor. So like, if people are listening to this and like you need help, like, all you got to do is reach out. Like, seriously, there are so many people that are willing to help you. Like, go to a meeting, don't sit in the back, don't leave early, like, find a sponsor. I picked my sponsor because she showed up to a meeting and had a Michael Kors purse. Like, if that's not, the epitome of like shitty sponsor finding, like,
And I'll tell you, I picked my sponsor, my first one, because she looked like a hippie, and I was like, I could get down with that. And then the second one, I picked her because she had red curly hair.
Oh my, see, exactly.
You got to pick,
who fucking cares? Just pick one and go for it. I'm like, oh, she's got a Michael Kors purse. That's more than I can afford right now.
Yeah, right.
Like, what the fuck? And, she showed up to these meetings and like, she wasn't dead inside, or at least she didn't look dead inside. Like, I was so fucking broken. And like, I mentored the sober house I lived in for a year. I moved in with roommates after, and not all of them are sober today. Some of them are, which is absolutely wonderful. But the truth is this disease will take you out, and it doesn't matter who you have around you. It doesn't matter, where you came from, what you do, how long you have. It doesn't fucking matter. It will come for you. And man, like, I look back, it's been 6 years. I look back at, I know how much you have. What, like 10 years now?
I have 9.
Like, that's fucking insane.
It really,
I remember looking at you, because you've always had more time than me, and I'm like, I'm never gonna have that much time.
Oh, honey.
Like, I'm never gonna be able to do that. And like, the matter is like, if you work a program, at least in my experience, whatever program that is, because I know there's other ways to recover out there.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, like, do what you got to do to keep your own sanity and sobriety. My experience may not work for everybody, and I understand that today, and that's okay. But man, am I glad I at least tried something different. So like, if you're out there and you think, I don't know, like, I can't keep going on like this, like, just try something different, because what you're doing clearly ain't fucking working.
Right.
Man, I'm so grateful, and I hate when people say grateful, because I'm always like, nah, when I hear
Gross.
yeah, gross, super like, I hate it, but I'm grateful the bottom of my head. There are some women in my life, I don't know, Ellen and Hannah, they're my friends up there. And, I got sober and I went through the steps the first time. And, like I said, I'm not that great about 10 steps. So I tend to have to write more 4 steps than I want to. But, my father passed away when I was 1.5 years sober. And I was working with others. And, my dad died, and he was my best friend. And I held a lot of guilt for recovering and leaving him behind. And one of the last conversations I had with him was, I really wish you would get sober. And my dad said, really? And I said, yeah, I really do. And that was one of the last conversations. And that was a time when I was making amends to him. And I would only give him, and oh my God, I laugh at this today, I would only give him gift cards, like Visa gift cards, because I didn't want him to buy drugs. Like, if he went and bought alcohol, I was like, whatever. Like, I can't really control what he does with the money I stole from him and deserve to pay him back. But I definitely didn't want him buying like heroin with it and overdosing and dying on my dime. So I would get him fucking gift cards to like the store. And when people gave me gift cards and I was actively using, I used to hate that shit.
Yep.
But my dad passed away in my recovery, in my early recovery. And I'm glad he passed away when he did, because I also know that I can't control that. But I had a program behind me, and I had a lot of women, Ellen and Hannah. And man, I would just go to Hannah's house and cry on her couch for like a week straight. And she was going through some stuff on her own, and we would just cry together on her couch. And, I got a vendetta against God at this point. And I was like, fuck my higher power. Like, what kind of higher power like gives me these beautiful kids and then takes them, and then takes like the only person in my life that, besides Kevin, that I like, that still loves me. Like, what kind of fucking God is that? And I would get like this vendetta against God, because that's like my favorite thing to do. Even to this day, I can do it. And I was so angry, and I'll never forget it, because Laura just said, so change your conception. I was like, you bitch, because she was right. So right. I did, and everything was fine again. But I also had to do a 4-step again on like, my higher power, and like things that I not necessarily left out, but like other things that came up later in sobriety. Because I'm not gonna lie, like, I don't remember everything in the first 4-step. Like, other things popped up along the way that I had to, do some work around. But like, I'm so grateful that I have a fucking program that I can actually work through these things, because man, I was miserable before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad died, my grandmother died 2 months later. It was like a fucking mess. And you know, my dad was a drug addict on disability, and he didn't have anything, you know. So like it was fell to my brother and I, and like we didn't have anything. I was like a year and a half sober, like working at Sunglass Hut, I think, in the downtown mall.
I remember that.
And like I didn't have, you know, that much money to my name. I was trying to save up to like buy a car and pay off all my tickets because I lost my license over a car accident, you know, during all that. And that I took for Kevin. Kevin crashed a car. Hold on. Kevin crashed a car. And I took the fall because Kevin had no license. So that was my own stupidity. And I used to blame Kevin for that. But really, it's like, could have let Kevin, you know, see his own consequences. But here you are. Like,
People
so
please.
codependent. Like, oh my God. But like all the, you know, I didn't have pennies to my name, and like my grandmother took care of it. And, you know, thank God for that woman, because I put that woman through so much shit. And, you know, she was on her way out, and like my dad wouldn't have survived if she died first. So it's like, you know, it worked out the way it was supposed to. And like I had to deal with a lot of grief in recovery, you know, grieving for my own loss of like losing my kids and like not having relationships with them and not knowing if I'm ever going to have relationships with them, and like having to learn with like being okay with that, because you know what, those kids may come and find me and tell me they hate me, and like I'm going to have to literally sit there and be like, okay. Or, you know, maybe they try a relationship, who knows. That's why I stay sober today, though. Is like, do I want my kids to come look for me and find out I died, you know, being a junkie? Or do I want my kids to come and find me and be like, hey, like, yeah, I lost you guys, but like that was the turning point in my life. Like I got my shit together. So
Now, in wrapping up, give us something that you want like people to take away. Like, what's one piece of advice that someone could take from this?
it doesn't matter how far down you go, whether you have what, you know, you didn't go down as far as I did, or if you did go down as far as I did, there's a way out. Like there is absolutely a way out. Like you just have to try something different.
And what's one affirmation that you wish you told yourself more often?
I am worthy. I am worthy. That's my favorite one, because I like to think that I am a piece of shit and that I am worthless and I have nothing to offer. And that is so untrue. So I tell myself that I am worthy. And whatever, you know, you can add stuff to that, like I am worthy of love, or I am worthy of kindness, or I am, like, you can change that to be whatever, you know, fits your.
Yeah, especially even 6-9 years into recovery, we can still think that way, unfortunately, you know. And like my go-to is, I am worthy of the life that I'm able to live.
Oh, I love it. See,
never
that's
want
good.
to, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think I was deserving enough to live this life. I didn't want to live this life. So that's, the word worthy holds a lot. And I like how you put multiple things with it.
Yeah. I will change it to like whatever I'm feeling. Like I am worthy of kindness today, or I am worthy of love, or I am worthy of respect, because sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I deserve the disrespect. Not necessarily. Nope. I am worthy of respect today. And it can be whatever you want it to be. But it's my favorite.
Yeah. What's one thing you want to accomplish?
Oh, that's a hard one. Because there's like so many. I would like, man, because I feel like I've accomplished like, so like every, like back in the day, I'd be like, well, I just want to accomplish like doing this or doing that, like getting the car, or like do it, like all the material things. And it's like, I would like to maybe eventually accomplish, first off, we're trying to buy a house. So that's like
Awesome.
The 5-year goal, but like that's so materialistic to me. I would like to accomplish going back to school and I'm not sure in what field yet because I'm so up in the air. Like I'd love to get an LCDC, but I also really like the vet stuff I'm doing. So who knows? But I'd like to go back to school eventually.
Awesome. And lastly, who is your biggest influence?
Oh my God. So that's too much. I have like 5. My biggest influence.
5.
All right. So 5 would be Laura,
Mm-hmm.
Hannah, Ellen. And then I have a sponsor down here. Her name is Krista. And then I also have, let's see, there was one more I was thinking of and now I forgot it, of course. Oh my God, her name is Lila. And she's like my sponsor's sister, but she's a sweet woman from New Jersey and she lives down here.
That's awesome. You are surrounded by some phenomenal people. Very fortunate to have that.
Yeah. So not only just people, but like, Kevin's like a huge influence in my life too, but like not in a dangerous codependent way anymore, which
Right.
is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Like our relationship is so much healthier now than it was. And I mean, it's not perfect because 2 drug addicts in a relationship is hard. We both have character defects that fly, but he has always been my biggest supporter. And he also, he knew me when I was at the lowest point in my life and still loved me.
Mm-hmm.
So like Kevin's in there too. We love Kevin.
We'll give it to Kevin.
We'll give it to Kevin.
And lastly, where can we find you?
Oh, well, fun fact. So I do, I play a lot of video games actually. So I do have a ton of socials. I am on Instagram, Pretty Petty LA. Funny, right? And then I'm also on Twitter. It's Pretty Petty TTV. I'm also on Facebook, Leigh-Ann Deneen. Ooh, that's just like my normal stuff. And then I also, so I stream on Twitch, Pretty Petty LA, and I play video games. And it's a paid hobby. So if y'all want to check it out, you want to check it out. We talk shit. We do a lot of fun stuff. And I play horror games mostly because, man, I like to scare the shit out of myself. But yeah, I love to. It's funny. And yeah, it's usually, and then I'm on TikTok too, and all sorts of crap. Pretty Petty LA is my tag.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and so open and sharing your story with us. You have a very powerful story, and I'm so grateful that you were able to do this with us today.
Oh, I appreciate you asking me. It was so nice to see your beautiful face. I haven't seen your face because I haven't been to Vermont.
I know, it's been a long time.
I'm coming back maybe in November for a women's retreat though Laura's putting on. So if you're interested in going,
we'll see. We'll see what's up then. But I want to thank you again, and we'll keep in touch.
Definitely. Thank you so much, honey.
You're welcome. And we out.